Well, Daniel, welcome to New Zealand. Thank you very much indeed
you
for sparing time to be with us. I suppose the million-dollar question is, what is America's role in the Middle East?
What is it, or what should it be?
Let's start with what is it?
Well, historically, the American role in the Middle East has been to keep the Soviets out. And since the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's not quite clear. Access to oil and gas, protection of Israel, but larger purpose still being argued over.
So what should it be?
Well, it should, at this point, be to confront radical Islam and defeat it. I see radical Islam, not Islam, radical Islam, or totalitarian Islam, or Islamism, as the great ideological threat of our time. Their goal is the application of Islamic law to create an Islamic order. And you can do this through violence, Bali, 9/11, many other examples. Indeed, one website called religionofpeace.com has counted some 15,000 Islamist attacks since 9/11, 5 a day. That's there. But I have a hard time seeing how they can achieve their goal of the application of Islamic law through violence. And I think they are coming to that same conclusion. Better to work through the system, better to work in the schools, better to work in the law courts, in the media, in the political process, and slowly, bit by bit, transform a country into an Islamic one. And the best example of where that's being done in the West is the United Kingdom, where one can see on an almost daily basis some little thing being changed. And in the aggregate, you have fundamental changes that are underway. Now, it's certainly not happened yet, but if we continue at the current rate, it'll be there before too long.
So this would be the application of Sharia law why is that so different from our Western law?
Well, Western law, especially, well, I mean, there are different Western laws. There's some based on Roman law, some based on English common law. But certainly in the Anglosphere, it's English common law that comes out of practice and comes out of centuries of evolution. The notion of privacy, the notion of freedom, these are historically based, came out of rulings and deals. I mean, Magna Carta is a deal between the king and the nobles. Islamic law is theological law. It is law that, as Muslims understand it, came from God. Now, that's not to say there isn't flexibility, but it is very different in spirit. I mean, the great debate in medieval Europe was whether the people or God are sovereign. Eventually, the people won. But in the Islamist view, it's God, not the people. And that's a fundamentally different premise. And then when you start looking at the specifics of it, say the status of women and all that entails, it's completely different. One of my favorite examples of how Islamic law is progressing is to look at the notion of polygamy, harems. Harems are now acceptable in many jurisdictions in the West because it's, for example, in the UK or in Ontario, it's been decided that if you arrive as a family that is polygamous, from a place where it's legal, you may continue to be a polygamous family. You can't contract it in the United Kingdom or Ontario, but you can bring such a family. Well, that's a huge change. That has immense implications. We are a civilization based on monogamy. Obviously not perfectly lived out, but we are a monogamous, and lawfully speaking, we're a monogamous civilization. Islam is a polygamous one. Well, you're finding polygamy is now increasingly acceptable in the West. That's a major change. That's what I'm fighting against. That's what I think the United States government should be fighting against. That's what I think your government should be fighting against. We've never before, we being Westerners, have never before faced an adversarial civilization in our own midst. People who say, what you have here in the West is dissolute and unacceptable. We have a better civilization that we will give you. To put in American terms, we will replace the Constitution with the Quran. That's something new. People haven't said that before. Yes, the fascists and the communists had their ideas, but they were Westerners, and they were working within Western ways, granted very awful ways, but they were Westerners. Here is somebody coming from the outside and saying, we have a superior civilization to your own, and Westerners don't have consciousness of that. And I think that is what's changing. For example, in the United States of late, there's been this huge debate over the so-called Ground Zero Mosque. And it's about this issue, about the nature of Islam and where it fits into American life. And one sees such debates increasingly taking place across the West.
The mosque, which it's a mosque and an Islamic centre, isn't it?
Islamic centre would be the more correct term. Yeah.
And they want to build this near the 9/11 site. Right. And President Obama said he can't see any particular problem with that, and that now seems to be causing problems for him. So there obviously is some resistance.
Right. No, this is an issue that has tapped into popular sentiments, and it's because New Yorkers and Americans nationally are against this Islamic center being built there, and it's become a major debate. It's been 4.5 months on the agenda, a very long time, and growing and growing. I think this is a turning point for Islam in America. It's something new, and I suspect that other countries, New Zealand, will have its moment when there's a national debate. I think you're not there yet, but it's pretty much inevitable.
Inevitably, though, people will say that they're not doing anything wrong. There is no law that says they can't build an Islamic centre there. They own the property. Right. There's nothing to stop them doing it.
That's exactly right.
And so inevitably people are going to say, well, it's only fair that they should be allowed to build that there. Why shouldn't they be allowed to build it there?
Well, my own take on this issue, first of all, I don't think it's a very important one. It's a symbolic one. I'd rather focus on substantive ones. But if we're going to focus on this, my view is that the location of the Islamic Center is far less important than the actual contents of it. Who is the leader? What are his statements and associations? Where's the money coming from? In other words, is this an Islamic Center that is on our side in the war against radical Islam? Or is it on the Islamist side? Is it part of radical Islam? And from what I can tell about the leader and the funding, is that it's on the other side. This is an enemy institution. And so I don't want it. I don't care whether it's close to ground zero or it's far from ground zero. I don't want it. So for me, it's the substance of it rather than the symbolism of it. And as I say, I'd rather focus on other issues, like this one I just mentioned about polygamy. It seems to me much more serious than the location of a mosque.
Okay. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and chat some more.